Hello and welcome to the Spiritual Solopreneur Series. Here's where we talk about everything spiritual, business, how the two mesh together, and anything else that happens to come up. My guest today is Isis Fabian. Isis is a conscious leadership educator and coach. She helps business leaders and influencers navigate today's social and cultural landscape so that they can more effectively connect with the next generation. Welcome, Isis.
Thank you, Bev. It is so wonderful to be here with you. I'm excited for this conversation.
Me too. Thank you for coming. Isis, I find what you do to be quite interesting and unique in your niche. How did you come to be an advisor to leaders who are in fact looking for help negotiating or navigating today's social and cultural landscape? Because it can be a bit of a rough terrain out there, can it not, when you're trying to get a message across?
Yeah, for sure. It started with taking a research role at a research think tank, a diversity, equity, and inclusion research think tank. And I ended up being on that research team for 7 years. And in that role, I did a lot of different things, but one of the most memorable things was reviewing reams of quantitative data across all these different identity groups and doing tons of interviews and focus groups with people across all levels of corporate America, across all industries, all intersections of identity. I did research also outside the US in Canada, Brazil, Poland, Hong Kong, UK, Japan, so many different places. And I'm neurodivergent, which means for me, a superpower that comes with that is a very pattern-based mind. So I can see really complex patterns. I can notice similarities and commonalities between things. So over the course of 7 years of doing this research, I felt like I kind of saw the matrix for how all these groups were connected in this kind of core system of human hierarchy that was leading to what we see showing up differently for the trans community, for instance, for the Black community. Historically, there have been all of these different elements, but it is this core oppressive system of currently what we have today, white supremacist patriarchy, but it's been different things throughout human history. And I wanted to apply that knowledge and that awareness in a way that could be more impactful than just continuing to put people to data buckets. And I also felt that the stories I was hearing from people would often be, cherry picked to serve a certain narrative with the data. And I was tired of taking that kind of paternalistic approach and directing all the attention on these groups that are being marginalized, which is like the symptom of the system. I was like, I want to turn the lens around and look at the perpetrators of these systems. And it's all of us, right? We all form the fabric of one another's oppression, whether we want to admit that or not. And we tend to be much more comfortable in our victim mindset than we are in our oppressor mindset. And I recognize that there's going to be this tremendous need for conscious leaders going forward. For me, that definition spans, self-awareness, being able to attract and leverage diverse teams, being able to leverage unique human potential, see people as the real unique beings that they are, especially with AI coming on the scene. That's just going to be more and more important as any differentiator is how do you kind of reach one another's humanity in a way. So I saw the value of that skill set. I love educating people on these things. I'll talk about it all day long. I'll talk about my own mistakes. I use my own mind and thought patterns as examples a lot. And transformed from that research into, I worked as an in-house consultant and subject matter expert in the tech world for almost 3 years. And now I just show up wherever I can be of service for leaders that are looking for that integrated awareness and elevating just who they are as humble people connecting with the next generation of the world.
Exactly. Interesting perspective when you think about our white supremacist sort of thing that's happening now. Well, it wasn't always that way. They're going back into history and seeing the whole perspective of how that evolved. And so just as a practical example, what would somebody be coming to you for Just as a quick, example, whether it's help with social media, a blog post, or a conference, or workshops, or whatever.
So on one end of the spectrum, it is coaching. So you might bring me in to coach a group of people who haven't been exposed to a lot of diversity, who are in a workplace where they're bringing certain views or political ideologies, not realizing the line between kind of violating someone else's humanity and right to exist versus sharing your own lived experience. So coaching groups like that, people like that, someone who's been reported to HR for being sexist, whatever, can be very helpful in those types of settings. And then on the other end, it is a lot of workshops, presentations, especially for nonprofits, smaller organizations, the tech world, where they're a little bit more progressive in a lot of ways, and a younger workforce. Any place that just has an influx of Gen Z and younger millennials that are really bucking their current cultural norms, coming in with non-binary pronouns and all that. So I come in and do workshops, again, integrating everything across the diversity spectrum. Might be one workshop on neurodiversity and disability and pronouns and gender identity and the relationship between all those things, really trying to build connective tissues so we can witness each other's shared humanity instead of being like, today I'm learning about Black people. Today I'm learning about people in wheelchairs.
Right.
So I'll stop there, but kind of those two ends and anything in between.
Gotcha. And it's it's what we don't know that is the worst danger. You don't even know you're doing these things. So we need somebody like you to let us know.
And I will say quickly, I'm very big on differentiating between ignorance and bigotry, right? Mm-hmm. Because right now we treat them like they're the same. And traditional diversity and inclusion and social justice discourse treats those as one and the same. And they're just factually not, right? A lot of people who might say the most ignorant sounding things will be the fastest to learn about another group and show so much humility about what they didn't know and be like, oh my gosh, I'm learning so much from this conversation, versus someone who's truly bigoted and malicious and is saying the exact same things, but it's coming from a malicious place. So I really think we need a lot more kindness and nuance in these conversations across the board.
Absolutely. Now, I know that you've had a few spiritual experiences in your life. We've had a couple of conversations touching on that. And I do want to talk about how your spirituality sort of is manifested in what you do. But how did you first, or when did you first realize that there's more to this life than just the stuff that we see and feel?
So it's hard to pinpoint a moment in time. As I'm sure we'll talk about more, I've been lucid dreaming since I was a child. So there's always that element of feeling like there's this whole other world, this whole other manifestation that I'm witnessing and bearing witness to in a way that no one else seems to talk about. And it caused a lot of, skepticism about the world. I think the reason I was lucid dreaming so much is because I was such a hyper observant child. And again, that's the neurodivergence, but I would just observe everything. And there was just something that always felt very off, just about the kind of societal rules that we have, the physical world, everyone's willingness to kind of like march around and act like this is just how it is. Well, there's like, a moon hanging in the sky. There's just something about, I was like, there's something missing here because it's just too arbitrary and too specific. And I always was thinking, broader than the US where I was born. How do people outside of my country experience the world? What do they see, beyond my planet? I was always so, I don't know why, just curious and desperate to get out of my own center. And I had some paranormal experiences over the years, which for a long time I just locked away and compartmentalized. I was like, not thinking about that, just locking that over there. But that created this kind of, continuing like pilot flame. I was like, there's something to interrogate here. And then it wasn't until during the pandemic when I read Katie Mack's book, I think it's called The End of Everything, Astrophysically Speaking. And so I was very big on science. I always identified as, agnostic, close to atheist. I always looked down my nose at people who were religious my whole life. I just thought you had to be kind of silly to believe those things. And then it wasn't until I read this really in-depth book on astrophysics and all the knowledge we have through science and don't have about the universe and the destiny of the universe that I was humbled into realizing, like, I'm not a scientist over here. I thought a lot of stuff was accounted for by science that simply isn't. I thought science had figured out gravity, for instance, right? They don't know what it is. They don't know why it happens. They have the formulas for it. There was a theory in this book about it being, spread across the multiverse, and that's why it's such a weak force compared to all the other forces in the universe. They had all kinds of speculation. And suddenly, it's almost like that book gave me permission to let go of this need for control and certainty. And finally, I was looking up at the stars at night, I didn't get this terrible feeling of like, it's just empty out there. And like that I felt like I had to believe, because I had this very science-oriented mindset. I was able to just let go and be like, the feelings I have about the true nature of reality that I've kind of suppressed my whole life, but experienced directly and indirectly, are so much more real than what's just observable with the very subjective human eye.
It is very subjective. And you would think that science would be able to explain gravity. I mean, I think a lot of people assume that it is explainable, but actually it's not. Now, did some of these experiences sort of shape your business or, your career path?
Definitely. In parallel with what I was learning through my research, which was that corporate America was so deeply unfair and unjust and telling itself so many lies about efficiency and productivity and concepts like professionalism, and just the scales falling from my eyes over and over again. And in that research, as I saw what corporate America really was and how ridiculously inequitable it was, and realizing I could go have all kinds of privilege. I could work in wealth management. I could be a millionaire. easy money. But I had no desire to do that, to play the game in the system, as long as it was so inequitable. So I was having that happen on one side, and on the other side, I was having this kind of spiritual awakening as I, became financially stable in my own life. I got all the things I wanted, right? A house, a life partner, financial stability, whatever I needed. And there was still this massive missing, piece. So I realized that my career could never be about hoarding money, which is essentially what we're told to do. And it's actually incredible to look back and realize like that I ever just bought that. Like I just was like, yeah, that makes sense. Like that's like never interrogated it, right? As most of us don't. And realize we are all connected and we are all immortal. I started having, I did past life regressions. I did a lot of work in my lucid dreaming, where I was able to go meet my higher self and speak with her and learn a lot from her. I had a couple people close to me die. I had one friend a year younger than me took his own life right before the pandemic. And then I had my only grandparent that I've ever known pass away at 99. And there was something in experiencing those deaths. I'd never had someone very close to me die before. And just knowing that they had gone somewhere, the previous version of me wanted to be like, they don't exist anymore. And I was just like, I just know that that's not true. Right? I can't force myself to internalize that. And it was the death of my contemporary, peer friend that I really had to struggle with that belief for the first time. And that was before the pandemic. So I hadn't had as much of that awakening yet. So it was seeing that we all are immortal in that way. We're these immortal beings. This is not the beginning. It is not the end. I had another lucid dream around my past lives and meeting a bunch of my past lives and being guided through that by my first human incarnative self. Was not expecting that. And so it just like really blew open my perspective, lost all fear of death, and just made it impossible, right, to go about business as usual. So yeah, definitely impacts my business life, my personal life. I felt a personal calling, for instance, from my higher self and the higher self above that one to be a bridge in this world, gesturing toward that reality. And that's why I struck out on my own. So many people think it's like wild to do at my age, I guess. It's like, why would you do that? You can make so much stable money in a corporate job. I was like, but that's not what I care about. And it doesn't matter how many times I say it, right? There's certain people who will never hear that and never understand what I mean when I say that. But I feel like being free to do as I please, to show up at places like this wherever I can and just flow with the energy of the universe makes it so I can serve my purpose more effectively. So now my life is centered around that spiritual purpose that has been handed down to me rather than whatever paradigm I was operating according to before. So Short answer is yes. It has dramatically impacted my
Awesome.
professional personal life.
I love that. Hoarding money. That's been the objective. That is the objective, according
Right.
to some people. And that's what we learned. That's what we learned growing up.
Right.
So talking about your lucid dreaming, this is something that's very interesting to me because I can't barely remember my dreams, never mind directing them or meeting anyone like a higher self or the one above that. I didn't even know there was a one above that. So how can I do this? And should I? And what benefit? Obviously, it's of benefit to you because of this things, entities you've met and places you've gone. So let me just back up to the mechanics of it for a sec. How does it work? Are you dreaming and you realize that you're dreaming and then go into something else? Is that what happens?
No, it's like it would be like right now. And my dreams are hyper realistic as well, maybe compared to other people. So it would be a setting as real as the moment I'm in with you right now. And for whatever reason, in the moment of having this conversation, I might realize, for instance, I don't remember waking up this morning. How did I get here? How did this start? And then that's when I realize I'm dreaming, and everything stays the way it is. You know, I often ground myself by feeling the surfaces around me, by rubbing my hands together. And it's as real, it really is as real as this world. And what you realize is everything we perceive in the waking world is in our own minds, right? And like, going back to science for a second, there's nothing objective about the material world around us. As I always say, like in a dream, I can look at the floor over here to the right that my dog is laying on, and I can say now in waking life, right, I could go walk on that floor. I'm not going to fall into oblivion. It's a solid floor. I can walk on it. But the same thing is true in a dream, right? Would you say that there's a floor there just because I can see it and I know that if I get up and walk over on it, I'm not going to fall into oblivion? Does that mean there's a floor there? Right.
No.
So that's right. So that's
no, there's no floor there.
We started realizing is, and there's another book, I actually have it on my desk. This guy works in advertising, but it's The Case Against Reality. And it's his own kind of run down this rabbit hole and realizing like there's no scientific basis. We just take for granted this is real according to some, you know, definition of real. Won't even get into that. And when I, you know, leave, my couch is still here the way that it is right now, and it is a couch, and that's what it is, and not understanding that that's actually an icon for something. So I see that in my dreams a lot. Things will shift and change. A lot of us experience, for instance, we're in a dream with a person, and the person goes from being our mother to being our father to being our brother to being our spouse to being our best friend. If you remember your dreams, you might be able to remember that. I notice it, you know, in real time. And it's because the best way to describe it is like our dreams are the fragmentation of our own consciousness into its own world, right? So my whole the buildings are me. The floor is me. The sky is me. Every person there is me. And when I'm lucid dreaming, if I choose to, I usually don't do this, but I can actually suck my consciousness out of people that I'm interacting with, and they become kind of like a husk. It's very creepy, so I don't do it that much. But it really is like, it makes you wonder, right? Like, well, why is then the waking world as stable as it seems? It feels like it's just another level up of another fragmented higher consciousness, which is what I believe, and the direct experiences I've had would indicate that. So back to your question about what it's like actually in the dream, it is just like this. It is the same as being here. You know, eating food is an incredible experience. I'm just like eating, you know, and it's some of the most delicious food, you know, you've ever tasted. There's a lot of different vibes to it. You know, I do a dream journal every morning. Sometimes it's more colorful. Sometimes it's more gray. Sometimes there's a sharpness to it. Sometimes there's a softness to it. I equate it to like, if you think about periods of your life, you think back to like high school, or think back to, you know, a place you used to live that you don't live anymore. There's qualities to that period of time, right? That you couldn't have indicated in the moment, but now looking back, you can say, was it more gray or was it more colorful? Was it darker or lighter? Was it heavier or more weightless? We can see those qualities looking back, right? And so I try to keep track of all of that, because then I can start to see what's happening in my unconscious. I'm at a point now where I'm actually trying to interpret the metaphors of the dreams while I'm in there, which is really challenging. And I often end up messing up my part in the plot when I do that, and confusing, the people around me, because I'm asking them questions. They're like, what are you talking about? So I don't know how good that tactic that turns out to be, but controlling the dream is not the point. I think that's the biggest message I would want to get to anyone who wants to lucid dream. Sure, I had my years of, running around, flying, hooking up with whoever was around, whatever I could come up with, eating a bunch of food, whatever there was. And it's really not the point. And you'll feel your mind fight you. It'll try to push you into another dream, have you wake up in your room. You think you just woke up from the dream, but actually it's a new dream. And we'll do all of these tricks to get you to stop doing that and get back on track with the intended storyline, because those storylines are really important, and they're serving our the work that's happening in our unconscious, and we're just an ego dropping in to witness it. So to people who can't remember their dreams, I actually think in some ways you're in a better place than people who can but don't understand what dreams are, because they misinterpret them all the time. They'll have a dream about somebody and think the dream was actually about that person, and it wasn't. It was about them, and that person was like an actor playing the part of you that they best represent, because you have something going on with that part of you. So they're just, again, a husk for a piece of you. So if it's a journey you want to go on, there are techniques to improve your dream recall, which is the first step to improving lucid dreaming. But it's a long journey. I have been on it my whole life.
Okay. Well, you got to start somewhere. So yeah, I will start. So it sounds like the lucid dreaming is continuing on. I mean, we're here to learn lessons, I guess.
Yeah.
And so there's another level of learning going on in the lucid dreaming, right? It's not about, let's see, I thought it was all about, going to the moon and if you wanted to, and things like that.
I'd say that's more astral projecting, right? Which is its own category. And I think anything that's happening in the greater world or in the external world, right? There is a corollary happening in our interior world. And we've heard of like manifestation, right? When like I think bad things happen to me and my life is bad and only bad things happen to me, that is the energy that I put out and is the energy that I attract. The universe doesn't know the difference between what we want and what we don't want. It's only, what am I manifesting? What am I putting energy into? And so just like you said, it's a learning that's happening for us as our ego in the waking world. When we're dreaming, it is an internal kind of calibration that's happening with our entire unconscious. You can think of it as inside yourself, there's hundreds of people. You can divide consciousness into as many small pieces as you want. It's not really a size thing, but you have so many different aspects of yourself. I mean, again, think about who you were as a child. That's a different version of you, but they're still in there. But that's not who you are now. So where are they? Right? There's the person you are when you yelled at your mom or whatever, right? Like there's all these different versions of us. They flow seamlessly through our ego in how we show up every day. And we get confused because we identify with the ego and we think my ego at any given moment is me, when really it's just a little sliver of our whole self. So the dream world is where all those selves are interacting. When I started my business, for instance, I set an intention through self-hypnosis to have absolute unwavering confidence and certainty in myself. That was my intention, right? And so you can set intentions like that, then your unconscious will work with them. And I can see it happening in my dreams. In this case, it was much more overt than it often is, where this very powerful masculine energy was being invited in, and it manifested in all these different ways. Each dream, it was like a different man. There was like a wedding, and then there was like a marrying off of my past self to some other place, and like all these celebrations. And then there was all this chaotic energy that came in, and I couldn't like sleep in my dreams. I was being followed around by this huge group of people that just kept showing up in all these different ways. Like I couldn't get any peace. It was all this long kind of like, it's almost like an acquisition of a company acquiring another or something, right? It's just like all of this stuff that has to be calibrated, and parts that have to learn how to work together, and ceremonies and celebrations, and like it really is a reminder. Then you wake up from that and you're in this world, you're like, this is the same thing. We live in a world of symbols. Everything about our world. It makes you see weddings very differently. It makes you see birthdays differently. It's just like all these little rituals and things that we have are serving this kind of connective calibration amongst us as humans, and it's all a reflection of the interior as well. It's really cool.
That is fascinating. Well, thoughts are things, as the book said. So you're absolutely right. When we have these kinds of thoughts, that's what is materialized in our life. I want to ask you about something else. Last time we spoke, you mentioned something called spiritual bypass. And we were just, as we were talking, you just kind of floated it by, and I went, what is that? What is spiritual bypass? And is it something that you come across in your work?
So it's a negative thing, spiritual bypass.
Thing. Okay.
Yeah. And it is something that I see becoming a bigger issue in my work as people find the spiritual path. It's frankly a much bigger problem for white people than any other group, because what tends to happen is we make the discovery that, oh, I am an eternal being. You might have a past life memory that returns where you're not the same race or ethnicity or gender, and you really detach from your identity on this plane and detach from accountability for that identity. So there's a lot of what spiritual bypassing tends to look like is in spiritual communities that are overwhelmingly white or homogenous in some other way, or men are really controlling them a lot and have a lot of the authority in them. When people try to raise these issues about that imbalance, the spiritual bypassing sounds like saying, well, we are all genderless and we are all raceless and we are all one. We are, caring about these things, talking about these things is keeping us in a baser, more primitive kind of space. We need to transcend all of that, right? How can we transcend it if we're talking about it all the time? But what we don't realize is that we can have all this intellectual, spiritual awareness, but our bodies, right? My body is matter descended from a lineage of enslavers in this world, right? The bodies that made my body enslaved other bodies. So there's things that my body knows, and one of them is that it's entitled to take up space, and that non-white bodies should get out of my way, and that my body's more important and it's more valuable, and all of these things. Like that's embodied knowledge. That's not something I need to believe intellectually for my body to move through the world with that knowledge. And so spiritual bypassing really cuts us off from that discovery. And the deep work, and Resmaa Menakem is a great leader in the somatic abolition space. So refer anyone to him who wants to learn more about this. The deep body work, it's very different from the kind of intellectual, spiritual exploration, even meditation, all these other things. They connect you back to that timeless, eternal self, but they're not as concerned with the ramifications of our material existence. And we can cause a lot of harm just by failing to do that work. So that's a example of what spiritual bypassing looks like.
Yeah, so it's almost like an entitlement of its own. It's kind of like, well, we don't have to worry about these niggly things because, there's bigger perspectives to think about. And so it becomes like an excuse.
Yeah, and it's much bigger than just the example I gave, right? Like if you and I were in a spiritual community together and I was regularly emotionally manipulating you, and you were saying like, hey, you're emotionally manipulating me. I'm just like, you just have a lot of feelings, you need to learn to transcend those feelings. Like I'm getting some very negative energy from you. You're being very negative. So I need you to actually stay away from me because you're really harming my energy. Right? Like that's also spiritual bypassing. It's anything that kind of says, forget about whatever human issue or need you're having because that's
it's not important.
Right. It's not important. That's actually detracting from the spiritual journey. Not the case.
Exactly. It's sort of the opposite to what I think a lot of spiritual solopreneurs experience, which is that voice in their head, that negative voice in their head that keeps saying, who are you to be charging money for your spiritual gifts? Or who are you to be charging that much money for your spiritual gifts? Or my personal favorite is, you can't do that. You can't do that. So from a business perspective, what is your advice for solopreneurs in particular, I think, because they're kind of on their own, going through that, just trying to quieten that negative voice in the head.
So I think there's two parts of this, right? One, because you brought up money. I think the money piece is its own thing. Money is a unique concept, icon, entity for us. And we have so much to deconstruct around our relationship with money. So when we think, oh, how can I charge that much, for this and that, we're thinking about money as this like expenditure. It's an exchange of energy. And it really is a circulation of money, right? I like to think about it. When I go to the local business down the street, I'm circulating my money. When I go to Amazon, I am spending my money because Jeff Bezos or whoever is going to hoard it, right? There's people who keep scooping the money out of our economy and hoarding it. And then everyone else is circulating it. I mean, if you and I were a community of two people, right, and we had $1 of currency, we'd just be trading it back and forth all the time, right? Money is not a real thing. It's supposed to be a means of exchange, but there are people who have bastardized that, and those people control our society, control all of our institutions and systems and structures. And so the rest of us have internalized this idea about money as if we come into any money, we're kind of like stealing it from somebody. Like it's this thing that someone else, had to really scrape around to get, and now we are taking it from them, or we're somehow tricking them out of it.
There's a finite supply.
Right. I mean, I think especially for people with spiritual gifts, there's so many people disconnected from the spiritual. There's so many people who they make, 6 figures in their tech job. I've worked with a ton of people like this. They would spend whatever it takes to get out of the spiritual hole that they're in as soon as they realize that's what it is, or they connect with a coach who opens things up for them, right? Like you have to do it based off of the value that you're delivering. If it is worth that amount of money to that person, like that's what it is. That's how you how you price a good or service. And when you undercharge and you can't sustain yourself, then you aren't showing up the way you need to for your clients, and you're not going to be able to keep delivering your gift in the world. I think that is what the baseline is for me, is like, how much do I need to charge to be able to keep delivering my gift to the world? Because all of us have a gift to deliver. And that's really all we're here to do, is be our authentic self and find that gift and channel that into the world. So by having these constructs about money, and money is a fake thing, right? By letting those constructs get in the way of you doing that, you're really not serving your higher mission. I think the second part of the question is around just like the voice, the negative voice. When we try to quiet it, even that kind of language, right? We're putting attention on it. We're saying, hey, you shut up. Again, anything we give attention or energy to just gets stronger, right? That just makes it more real. And so it can never be a matter of giving it energy. I actually yesterday was doing a meditation about fear, and I had gotten to a very relaxed state, and there's an invitation to look your fear in the eye and say, hello, how are you? Why are you here? And I wasn't feeling particularly fearful that day, but I was like, okay, I'll do this because I'm doing this meditation. And my fear actually appeared to me as a white dragon with red eyes. And it was like a fishy kind of dragon, just kind of floating, and it was looking right at me while kind of floating just like this, and it was just looking right at me. And I was like, hi, how are you doing? Right. And this is after learning that the best way to handle these things, to have a conversation, say, okay, what are you so afraid of? No, I'm not the one who's afraid. You're afraid. What are you so afraid of? Right. What is it? Oh, you want to make sure we keep a roof over our heads. Okay. Where's the threat? Where's the reason that we can't keep a roof over our heads? What's the thing? I understand that you're concerned, but I've got it taken care of. I promise you that. Right. And like literally getting to a place where I'm holding this little dragon like on my thumb. I'm petting it like it's my cat, I'm like, it's okay. It's going to be okay. All right. You don't have to worry about this. Like all the stuff you're worried about, like you don't need to worry about it. It's almost like going back to your inner child kind of reparenting thing, right? So you can try stuff like that. And if you still have that voice going, just make it the background noise that it is, put your attention somewhere else. Even if you have to distract yourself, just not giving it attention, let it become that kind of background white noise. It's really powerless. It is, if you don't give it power, but giving it the attention and the fighting it, that's what makes it worse. And that's what makes it sustained, because the dragon, when you're doing that, the dragon's like, yeah, I must be bringing up some really good points because she's dropped everything to focus on me and what I'm bringing to the table. So I'm going to be even louder because I'm like, yeah, you're right. This is what we got to focus on. I'm really afraid of all this stuff, right? Like that's literally what we're doing, right? And so again, it's another aspect of self. We can't discard or sever any parts of ourselves. That only takes us backwards, right? It's all about seeing, witnessing, embracing, loving. When we do that work within ourselves, we're able to set that example within the world.
That is awesome. Embrace the thing, give it a little love, let it kind of have its background noise, and eventually it might just disappear, or temporarily disappear at least.
And if it comes back, just feel like, oh, why are you here?
Oh, you're back.
Oh, wow, you're concerned. What is it? I mean, I do the same thing with my cat. He starts meowing. I'm like, what?
Exactly.
What is it?
Exactly. The dog barks when someone's at the door. I'm like, I got it covered. It's okay.
It's okay. Exactly.
Look at my phone. We can see who it is. Like, don't worry.
Right. Exactly.
So I do want to ask you about you talk about the sort of societal shift towards social justice and that sort of thing. This ascension or earth reset thing that I keep hearing about and not really understanding, is that part of that, or is that something entirely different? Or do you know?
They're probably related. There is, and I've received, from my higher self, visions of kind of what's happening on Earth right now. It is an inflection point. It is a very special time to be incarnate on Earth. I actually get the impression that there's a lot of energy that would love to be incarnate on Earth right now at this time, but only the ones who had the greatest potential for growth and learning are here. So we're here at this inflection point. What's it going to look like? We don't know, but we can see the collapse happening all around us. It's happening. We're in the midst of it, right? You can choose to be a frog in the slowly boiling water and be like, I don't know what you're talking about, but these systems are collapsing. More and more people are recognizing that it's happening to the natural world, faster, because we've been creating the collapse and also protecting ourselves from it. But it is happening. And the earth is a much bigger, much more powerful energy than any of us. We're part of the earth, right? Just like in my dreams, all those people are me. All of us are the earth, and so much more. And the more than human animals that are all on the same energetic frequency where they understand how to live in balance. And we are like the black sheep that has gone off and is like totally disconnected and totally confused. And they're just like, hate to see that happen to him, but gotta feel sorry for the guy, right? Like that's really the vibe from the rest of life on Earth. And now what I see happening every day, I feel like I hear from a new person or see a new person who is like putting two and two together, having these kind of spiritual needs that have arisen, only recently. And on the one end, you see people falling to addiction, right? Falling off the wagon, just like the ones who are the most invested in the illusion of this society and this world. They just can't handle what I perceive as like a rising vibration that's like affecting everybody. But are you prepared to resonate with it, or are you going to fall apart? And like I said, it is happening right now. Dominoes are falling. Preparing doesn't look like hoarding material, hoarding food or whatever. It is an internal preparation. It's actually really exciting because we all have the means to do this. There's an expansion of the inner vessel, right? I talked earlier about releasing the fear of death. If you can get to that place and really have that faith in your eternal being, that does a lot because you're like, yeah, I could die today. I don't care, right? I'm truly not attached to just living as long as possible. Again, where did that idea come from, right? You'll have an ant sacrifice themselves for the colony without a thought, but we just think that living as long as possible is this very important thing that we must do, just like hoarding money. Like this is just critical to everything we're supposed to learn and our purpose for existence. Avoid suffering at all costs, right? When through suffering and discomfort is where a lot of our learning happens. So I think the preparation really looks like that inner work. And this is where it ties back into the work that I do, where I try to create that bridge for people to just see things differently, think differently, bring that self-awareness a little more broad and start being honest with yourself. That's where it starts, right? When you're making judgments of people around you, when you have feelings that are strong, really interrogating, where did that come from? Why am I having that feeling about that person? If I see a man wearing a dress, right? There's a lot of people who are like, oh, like they feel scared and uncomfortable and gross, and that feeling is not about that person, right? Just like that dream is not about your husband. The feeling is about you. Every feeling we have is about ourselves. Every judgment we make is about ourselves. Every conclusion we draw is about ourselves. We are living in, delusion as we're projecting it out into the rest of the world. So it is a journey of bringing that awareness inward, thinking like, why do I have the hate in my heart? Right? Where is this coming from? An example I love to give in very liberal progressive circles when people are really like nodding their heads about this, I'm like, how do you feel about Trump supporters? Like, oh, I hate them. That's the one place where I just can't. I'm like, okay, there you go. Like, you're literally, all of it is people who won't get vaccinated and Trump supporters. Like, it's so strong and palpable. I talk about the superiority inferiority complex a lot, because that's really what all this boils down to, is the idea that any given human being can be superior or inferior to another, right? That is an illusion. And so to say, well, I agree with you, except for Trump supporters. Like,
that's where I draw the line.
Yeah, that's where I draw, and that sounds very reasonable. They're like, except of course, people voted for Donald Trump, except for them, of course. That probably goes without saying. I'm like, no. That's those are human beings, right? We're all delusional in one way or another, and people are reacting to their impulse of needing these structures and systems to change. They need them to change because they're seeing that what they're getting is not enough, and it's not feeding their spiritual needs. And they might look at the government. I mean, honestly, the political divide is like, one side sees how corrupt the government is, and the other side sees how corrupt corporations are. Well, it's just a lot of like fighting back and forth across that. I'm like, okay, well, they're both completely corrupt. So I know that's hard to swallow, but they're all working together. They're all on the same page. We're the ones who are not on the same page. They love that we're fighting amongst ourselves about stuff like this, because it just doesn't, it just doesn't matter.
Makes it much easier for them to conquer.
Maintain the status quo, right? To just to create artificial inflation and whatever else. We won't get into all of that, but this is what the internal work looks like. It's realizing that rage, you're putting outward, like, it's not going to satisfy that deep need, that deep fear, that deep hole. Work with our own fear. What is the genesis of it? What does it actually mean? Where does it come from? Can we get in touch with our eternal self, right? There's a lot of different ways to do that. Some people learn tarot and get really into that. Some do hypnosis. You can also do, obviously, the lucid dreaming. Other people do astral projecting. I'm sure there's many other ways. Deep meditation, if you can, that's obviously the most ideal approach. If you can get into deep meditation and get to that state where you are not aware of your surroundings, but you're awake, well, kind of like asleep, but aware, that moment between wakefulness and sleep, we're all so unaware of it. None of us have any memories of it, but that's a very real space and place that we're in. That's kind of like the best place you can get to. I mean, I'm at a place now where I can ask my higher self a yes or no question at any time of day. And I have to be very careful with how I formulate the question because
you might get what you ask for.
Well, it's not even like asking, can you give me this, but just saying like, should I do this or this? Or even saying, is it better to do this or this, right? They might say, oh, it's better to do that because it's going to cause me tremendous suffering a week from now, but I'm going to learn more from that suffering. So
right.
My higher self is better, right? So you have to be very careful with how you formulate questions if you get to that place. But I do think it is first just finding a spiritual community, finding whatever works for you to recognize that you're an eternal being. This life is not, this is not it. It's an avatar, right, for you. I thought I liken it to like identifying with the finger puppet, right? I'm the person with the finger. I'm not the finger puppet. But these bodies, like the way that we're out here, we all are so identified with the finger puppet. We're like, I'm going to die. I'm losing my mind. I can't take this anymore. It's like, no, you can. Right. But it is the puppet that you're identifying with that feels overwhelmed. Right. It's the same. And it's much easier for me because I see it in my dreams. So I can bring that as a corollary back to real life. You have these stress dreams, you're so stressed out. I don't know if you say you don't remember your dreams. So I don't know if you remember any like nightmares or stress dreams.
Oh, yeah, occasionally.
Yeah, they just get worse and worse. They just get worse and worse when you realize it. And you know what's really interesting? I've had moments where I have realized I'm dreaming in the middle of a super stressful situation. And I don't want to accept it, that I'm dreaming. You would think you'd be like, oh, what a relief. I don't have to deal with trying to make this flight anymore. Thank God. You know, that's what you would think. Instead, I'm like so attached to the stress. I'm like, no, but I'm trying to make this flight. I've made it so far down the terminal. It's like, if I could just realize I'm never going to make the flight. That's the whole point of the dream, is I'm never going to make the flight. I'm going to be running into obstacle after obstacle. That's what this dream is about. No, I'd rather be like, no, I'm so close. The gate's right over there, you know? And
I'm
like,
gonna make it. I'm gonna make it. No, you're not.
For me, that was a revelation, because I was like, here I am in waking life. We get attached to stress in the same way. We're like so attached to the things that we are fighting for and the brick walls that we're hitting our heads against, right? It's like an unhealthy relationship. We're just like, no, I'm going to make it work. I don't want evidence, like someone to slap proof in front of me that this relationship is doomed. A genie could come down and be like, I'm from the future. This relationship is horrible. The sooner you get out, the better. You're like, I don't want to hear that. Right? We don't care about the truth as much as we think we do. So to really recognize that. And one other thing I'll say is I don't know if you've heard the concept of the second arrow of suffering from the Buddha. It's a long like metaphor why it's called that, but it's basically the concept that there is the pain we will experience that's unavoidable, right? Like you break your foot. But there's a second suffering that we inflict completely upon ourselves. And as an example of how I've been integrating this in my life, the other day I stubbed my toe. And I went to do the thing I always do, which is to grab my toe and go, just be like, no, just be like angry about it and fight the pain. And I remembered that I was trying to integrate this practice whenever I feel pain. And instead, I kept my facial expression neutral. I left my foot where it was. And I put all my attention on the pain instead of trying to deny it and fight it. Let the pain radiate out from my toe to the rest of my body, just radiate out, and made my whole body present to the pain. And it was literally like 10% as painful as a normal toe stub would be, just by denying the second arrow of suffering, just by not creating that whole narrative around it. It's the same thing we were talking about with those the intrusive thoughts earlier, right? When you fight them, they get so much more powerful. When you have pain like that and you're trying to fight it and you're like, no, I won't be present to this pain, I won't witness the pain, you're just causing it to metastasize inward on itself, which just makes it worse and worse and more powerful. Same with when you're grieving the death of someone. If you're alone, it's so much harder because the pain just metastasizes inward. It folds in on itself. When you're surrounded, say, by your 10 closest family and friends that are all holding you and they're all present to your grief as you're crying and releasing that, it's so much more of a release because they're actually receiving and metabolizing your pain. They have bodies that can do that because they're not, being wrecked by the same pain that you are. So that's been a huge discovery for me, is the whole second arrow of suffering. I've been applying it everywhere, and it's truly incredible how much stress it has just erased from my life.
Wow. That is fascinating. So it sounds like this ascension thing is the vibration is ascending, and we're all sort of feeling the effects of it, whether we realize it or not. And
that's my personal assessment. I think people would describe it all different ways.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. Well, we've talked about quite a few things, and I just wonder if you have a sort of parting message, a little message for the general message for whoever is viewing this conversation.
Yeah, I guess I've probably already said this, but to speak directly to someone viewing this conversation, what I'd love for them to, at least consider, if not take away, is know that you are divine, you are perfect, your behaviors and illusions might not be, but don't be afraid of the you that is deep down, the real you, right? Stop trying to discard and sever off parts of yourself. The only thing the world needs from anyone is for you to be authentically who you are. Be the writing implement that your higher self is using, right? Let the ink of divine intelligence flow through you, right? Be what you actually are, and not what societal norms and all of these structures are telling you that you're supposed to be, and really get in touch with that. We all have that inside. We know the ways that we mask ourselves and pretend to be something we're not. The most important thing you can do where you're like, who should I be? What should I do? Is like, what does it take to be who you actually are, right? I really like the writing implement one. It's like your higher self's trying to write and you're like throwing the pen all over the place. You're like, I can't write this story because you keep, what am I? Who am I? What am I doing here? It's like, just be, and it will flow through you. And stillness is the first step to that. Meditation, being still, sitting, thinking. Just sit and think. A lot of people give up on meditation because they're like, too many thoughts keep coming in their head. And they're like, oh, I can't do this. Okay, then just sit and think. How often do you do that?
Don't let the thoughts come, just like the negative thoughts. Let the thoughts come in meditation, and it'll eventually, it will eventually calm down if you're just sitting there still.
And even if you just are thinking your thoughts, you know, if you don't know what to do, especially for solopreneurs who have like a different kind of day, the way your day is organized, no one else kind of owns your time. If you don't know what to do with yourself, you want to be productive, but you have that very kind of frenetic energy and you're just like, oh, like, I don't know what to do right now. Just sit and be with your thoughts. You can try to meditate, but eventually the right next step will come to you. It'll just come. That is your higher self speaking to you. It's like, okay, now that all that noise is gone, can you do the thing that I want you to do? Can you consider it? And you're like, oh, I hadn't even thought about doing that, right? Like stillness, it can't flow. And we're so addicted to distracting ourselves because it's scary, the world we live in. It's very scary to actually sit with reality. Like it's terrifying.
It's much easier just to send it away and be distracted.
Head in the sand, right? I always like ants on a log, you know, like, oh, I don't need to know what a log is. I don't need to know what the forest is. I've got a crumb to carry and that's it.
That's it. Know? And I need to watch TV now.
Right. Why? And think of, like, interrogate why we do these things and why we have these thoughts and judgments, right? Why do I feel this pull to turn on the TV? While the TV is on, why do I feel a pull to pick up also my phone?
Exactly.
I also have a pull to get a snack. Like,
I'm never satisfied.
Right. What am I right? Satisfied in what way and with what? And like, what are these things obscuring, you know, by having these things, keeping my mind occupied? It really is like a little death in a way. I mean, you can lose hours to watching TV or on TikTok or whatever it is. I'm not saying that I don't do these things. I'm just like sitting in meditation all the time. It's very hard to let go of these numbing behaviors, but it's because we want to dissociate from the reality that we're so familiar with, from the consensus reality, because deep down we know that there's something very wrong with it. There's something so antithetical to our true nature about this consensus reality. But I think the rising influence is to challenge the consensus reality, to be different, to show you there is another way other than just coping. I think so many people are just coping with this reality right now. And it's just not going to be sufficient. I think it's just not going to be enough. Like you said, you're never satisfied, right? There's a much deeper spiritual need, and it's going to make itself more and more known for each person as time goes on.
Exactly. Isis, where can people find out more about you and your services and how to get in touch with you?
I would say isisfabian.com, easiest place, ISISFABIAN. And I also post more on LinkedIn than anywhere else. So if you want to see the stuff I write about and talk about, LinkedIn is the best spot.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here today. It's been an awesome conversation, and I would love to do it another time as well, if you're up for it.
Of course.
All right. It sounds good.
Thank you, Bev.
Okay. Bye for now.